it's me here, your Motorwine Emperor here. Let's get ready to see Mick Foley like this. Here we go. I will see you at the building. There you go. I'll check you. Yeah. Well, see you there.
Thank you, Flash. I don't want to start out on a down note, but I was actually disappointed to hear my music because before we went out, Jamie said, do you have a choice in music? I said, yeah, Wreck by Jim Johnston. Johnston with a T, Johnston. He said, if we don't have that, second choice. And what did I say?
He was like, have you got Becky Lynch's music by any chance? I'll be honest, I straight up looked at him and went, Mick, you can't steal everybody's pop. That's
man, but it would have been fun. I love the music. It's got great energy, and it just would have been a trip to come out to it. Second half? All right. Let's cue that up for this.
We're going to hold you to that now. If he comes out to anything but Becky Lynch's music, these people are going to riot. Am I right?
Let me see if I still have... Oh, well, go ahead and I'll turn my phone on. We'll try to... I'll see if I can text her. And get an answer. For a guy who's known for wearing socks in the ring, I don't seem to have remembered my socks for this show.
I thought it was a fashion choice, personally, Mick. It inspired me. I was about to whip these bad boys up.
Well, let's go ahead, man. I really appreciate you guys being out here. One of the fun things is that I don't know the questions, so we don't know what direction the show's going to take. Sometimes you go off on tangents, and you can find a lot of fun in the strangest places, but putting a lot of pressure on Flash, I guess. So, like, if it's not good, it's fun.
I picked the wrong night to wear a turtleneck. But to be fair, somebody once told me that a show is only as good as its crowd, so...
Woo!
Sycophant! But I said, we're going to go on some tangents, and we spoke upstairs, and you said that we had a little bit of a discussion, and I didn't tell you the questions, and some of the boys will tell you I went off for about 5-10 minutes, because even after having a brief conversation with you, my whole mindset changed. I was like, right, I've got to add this, I've got to change that. So I know you don't know the questions, Mick, but now I don't know the questions.
That works out good. This could be the first show I've been at in 2 years where the number of Cactus Jack shirts outnumber the number of Bullet Club shirts. And I'm not even sure that's true. I was in Australia, and I was auctioning off the shirt off my back, which was a rugby shirt. And I was like, the only person who's going to be offended by this is the person who gave me the rugby shirt a day earlier to see me auctioning it off my back for a good charity. And I didn't realize that Melbourne had like 8 rugby teams. And people were getting really angry that I was wearing the wrong shirt, to the point where I had to actually put up a sign that said, it's for charity. Cut me some slack. And by about the 30th guy that goes, you're wearing the wrong shirt, I said, well, thank you, guy wearing a Kevin Owens shirt to the Mick Foley show. Like, at least I made the mistake out of it, lack of knowledge. You intentionally put on someone else's shirt and went to my show with it. So I just said,
I definitely wouldn't make that choice. How I usually, because I do run a podcast we spoke about, how I usually like to start these is, what's your earliest memory of wrestling, Mick? When can you remember kind of watching something and really falling in love with professional wrestling?
My brother and I used to watch it when I was, 9, 10, 11 years old. And it was something we goofed around about. Like, I couldn't understand why some people took it so seriously. But then it was... the era of Bruno Sammartino and Ivan Putski, the Valiant brothers. There was something about like the pomp and circumstance of it that really just appealed to me. But it wasn't until Jimmy Superfly Snuka came along when I was like 16 when I started. Like I was kind of awkward socially anyway, but now instead of feeling awkward about going out, I had a legitimate reason to stay home on Saturday nights to see. And Snuka, he didn't do the dive every night, you know, and you might not see him on that show. For people, there's a lot of people who go, wrestling the way it used to be. Like, they long for the way things used to be. It's like, I defy you. I dare you to go back and watch one of those TV tapings that WWE used to do in Poughkeepsie or Hamburg, Pennsylvania. They only had about 3 or 4 venues that they used. And the TV, production values were weak, matches were terrible. Once every 6 weeks, you might get like a 3-star match. But man, it didn't matter. What only thing that mattered to me is that I might see Snuka come off the top rope, and that was a reason to stay home. And more importantly, it was a reason, like, that was the first person who put my butt in a seat, in a wrestling seat, when I went to Madison Square Garden. Not the cage match, not the famous cage match from October of '83, but their first match at the Garden, July of 1983. And the energy was amazing. It was a great blood feud at that time, and I remember Snuka, he was a man of few words, but he got his point across, and then they went to interview him, and he flung his hair back. He said, "I'm not through with you yet, Don Morocco." And I knew I would travel at any lengths to see the rematch. And so, yeah, that was when I really fell in love with it, and like absolutely positively had to find out what was happening. And probably the first thing that I loved that loved me back was professional wrestling. Might be the case for some of you as well, right?
Yep.
It's always there for us, right? Like, that's one of the nice things about Monday Night Raw. It may let us down. Occasionally we wonder, but then every once in a while it'll remind us of why we fell in love in the first place, And it is very much like a relationship in that way, that it's kept us hanging around for a long time. So it's wrestling, unlike other shows, other sports, like, it's always there for you.
You talk about Snuka being covered in blood, and you yourself is somebody that shed a lot of blood. Do you feel that when we
Head slammed in the steel cage, like in '98, and he told me that he was fine until I walked in the room and said, "Okay, let me take a look at it." He said, when I went, "Oh my God," he went, "It's got to be bad if Mick Foley's selling it." It was like anything else. It got overdone over the course of time, and so I think WWE, they were correct, in taking the route they did, and now you'd be hard pressed to find a great match that has blood in it. It's the exception instead of the rule, and I think it works better that way. I'm largely known for having wild and bloody matches, but with the exception of my comeback matches from 2004 on, I think I only had 4 matches in the entirety of my WWE career that could be considered bloodbaths. Like, it just wasn't something that was done, and when it was done, it was, an in-ring mishap. But, I wore that mask, and for the large part of my career in WWE, you have very little, there were, a couple stitches over the eyebrow, little things here or there, but very few of those, always busted wide open. I do miss them, but I think there has to be a purpose and a reason to have matches. You do a pretty good Vince there, right?
When you say, you went to see Snuka and you said you travel anyway to see that rematch, was that the real ignition for you to kind of get into the backyard and start?
Yeah, well, I wasn't really a backyard wrestler. We filmed a home movie in our backyard. And so we were kind of talking a little bit earlier about, a race, and it's just funny where things go. Like, the biggest, I got a lot of credit for being the star of that, backyard movie where I ended up coming off Danny Zucker's roof onto those mattresses. But the big feat there was that the wrestling montage scene, which was actually fairly well produced at that time, nobody had camera phones. I wouldn't even have thought, If you had a video camera, it meant you had to hold something heavy on your shoulder. It was good to them, when they were on their way up. And so the sophomores the students who were sophomores at my old high school were seniors when this independent wrestling show came to town, and they'd heard rumor about this movie, but they'd never seen it. There was no internet way to transport it. It was just rumored. And so we turn it on, and it's actually some of the worst wrestling maneuvers, imaginable. Like, I didn't know how to do anything, but it was cut with good music, and we had people cheering, like actually actively cheering in the gymnasium. I turned around and I saw Tommy D, the promoter. He had this look on his face like he just discovered the next star. And time would prove him wrong. But I did. That was how I got my foot in the door. After that night, he asked me if I wanted to start in his ring crew, and so I would travel about. I don't know what the kilometers is. I guess 400 kilometers. About.
No, we do miles.
400 miles. Yeah, about 700 kilometers, I think. Round trip, and my career actually in a way started in an 8-story storage facility called Big Yellow Storage, and I would drive down from university, and it was the only ring I've ever heard of that was kept in a storage facility. All the other ones are on trucks, and I would have to move a few tons of equipment, right? I don't know how much a ring weighs, but several tons. I would have to move it piece by piece out of the storage unit into the freight elevator, take the freight elevator down to the ground floor, remove it piece by piece, put it into the truck, and then drive the truck to the venue. And this was a big if I got the ring set up before the fans started coming in, then Dominic DeNucci would teach me, and by teaching me, I mean stretching me, at least until he saw the respect I had for it, and then he told me about these guys he was training in Pittsburgh, and everything changed from there. But for the first several months, it was just a matter of him testing my will and twisting my body in precarious positions. But it was good. It was a character builder. I do vividly remember how I just bargained with myself with that bag of crisps, because I've been tired, and I was trying to get like a energy drink, and then I said, hey, divide that horrible expenditure of calories by being more lively for all of you out here. But I remember cutting deals with myself when I was driving, because I'd be, while you're driving, seems like a good idea at the time, right? To catch a nap while you're driving. That's how tired I would be. So I actually pulled over. My college roommate lived in Rockland County, about 100 miles from where I was, about 100 miles from university. And I pulled over, and I knew where his house was, and I knocked on the door, and his mother answers. There I am, I got bruises all over me, and it smelled terrible. And I asked if I could come in her house, come inside the house to take a nap. And by the time I got back to my college house, my roommate had all my stuff out on the lawn, and he was like, "Leave me alone, you effing weirdo." But yeah, I was paying my dues, for sure.
Why do you think that you say about setting the rings up and transporting it down, and then hopefully you get a few minutes in the ring before the show starts? Being myself somebody who's come through the wrestling scene and continues to do so, why do you think that the way things work hasn't really changed when it comes to that?
In terms of what?
So you say that you set the ring up and then you would transport it and you'd hopefully get a few minutes in the ring beforehand. Now, me being a young wrestler, broke in about 7-8 years ago, it hasn't changed. And I can tell you now that seeing the newer wrestlers come, it hasn't changed still. They still set the ring up and they still hope that they can have a chance.
Let me segue by sending out a voice message earlier. Becky, it's the hardcore legend Mick Foley. Yay! I'm here in the UK, and I'm bragging to people that I know you well enough to get a text back from you. They want to make me look good in front of the boys? There we go. And one of the cool things, I was just talking about this like yesterday. That it was 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. It was my son Huey's birthday, and we were in Florida. we didn't really have something picked out. He loved NXT at the time. And so I looked up their schedule, and there was an NXT house show like 3.5 hours away in an armory. And so I called WWE, because my name still means a little something there. And so they knew we were coming, but the NXT wrestlers did not know they were coming. So there's a little armory, a couple hundred people, and all of a sudden the Foley family comes in to celebrate a birthday. And so I just got to have some cool pictures, at the show. It was the first time I met Becky. But my wife remarked, like, how odd it was to see the wrestlers breaking down the ring. And I said, that's the best way to learn. You're literally learning from the bottom up. Even though these people, in some cases, that have 6, 8, 10 years of experience, you learn humility that way. I think that's Shane McMahon started on the ring crew as a teenager. Mr. McMahon's really big on on starting from the bottom and working your way up, and I think that's the best way to learn. You can't go any lower, and I always promised myself that when I made it, I would help the guys set up the ring, and that's one promise I never made good on. I never actually set up another ring once I was done with that.
I think that's quite interesting to say that, because I was over there doing some of the coconut shows, which still guess the ones you would have gone to, and you are right, people who you guys would have seen on like Takeover and stuff like that, your Adam Cole's, your Roger Strong, they're all taking the ring down, putting the ring up, and they're in charge of that then. They kind of have a system, and you've got the guys at the top that kind of say how things run, and yeah, I think I can't comment enough that I think that is how it is. You learn from the bottom up, and you appreciate everything a little bit more as well then.
I remember the first time I helped set up the ring, and now I was all alone in a wrestling ring for the first time, and I thought I had like the theatrics down, like I thought I could cover that part of it, and I honestly didn't think the wrestling part was going to hurt that much. And I said, well, let me just kind of throw myself into this turnbuckle, and I'll fall backwards like I see the guys do on TV. And so not only did I hurt myself running myself into the buckle, but I didn't know anything about tucking my chin to my chest. And so when I hit the ground, my head whiplash, boom, I hit my head, and I was like, my first thought was, there's no way I can do this. And if I hadn't talked so much about wanting to be a wrestler, if I hadn't made it so public, it was just like a hidden desire, I would have quit after 2 or 3 weeks, because I hated it and I was bad at it. When I finally got to DiNucci's school, everyone else had just enough training to where they could beat up on me. And I remember my hotel, I'd park the car and I could barely make it across the parking lot to the hotel because I was so sore and I was taking bumps incorrectly. Some people have remarked that they don't see guys take flat back bumps like I do, where I would just end up going backwards, and kind of like with a T. Some of them guys from Mexico, they learn, literally slapping. That's that's how I was taught, and I ended up bruising my elbow bone so badly that for several months I was wearing like hockey protectors. It was just so tender. Not only that, but a lot of guys have this problem when they hit the ropes and they do it incorrectly. You should hit them underneath your armpit. And I was tall. I was taller even now that I've shrunk a little bit than people think. And DiNucci's ring was kind of small, so I was actually hitting the ropes with my kidneys and causing intense pain and bleeding,
We won't get into that.
You won't get into how I knew I was bleeding, but it would become apparent, that there was some internal bleeding. And between the bruising of the kidneys and the elbows, I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could do it.
So are you saying that the reason that you're here right now in front of us, and because you've done so much, is just because you're really stubborn?
I made a big production out of telling people I was going to be a wrestler. And I didn't tell any of those guys at university because I knew they'd ride me about it, that they'd be down about it. They would have an inkling because they would go to the park. Then things started clicking after about 4 weeks there. Then things started clicking. I said, okay. And DiNucci, to his credit, he would spend time after. Now it seems like a sunset flip is like a nothing move, right? First of all, it's not a very good false finish. False finish, by the nature of the word, should lead someone to believe it could be the ending of the match. You tell me the last time someone has won a match with a with a sunset flip, right? It gets no reaction because no one's ever won a match in the last 10 years. But at the time, like, that was like the apex of what I thought a human body was capable of doing. And when he talked to me about a sunset flip, I was just like, I can't do it. And he ended up staying afterwards, though everyone else went home. And he stayed with me, and we worked on that sunset flip. And when I realized I could do a sunset flip, I thought I could fly. And then I was able to take that elementary move, and almost everything I did went through a thought process of like, okay, that looks good. It would look better on the concrete, wouldn't it? And so that was my philosophy of it looks good in the ring, it'll look better out there. And then because I couldn't jump high, I learned to jump from high places. And so the sunset flip, as if it wasn't stupid enough, you know, like to do it off the ring apron. You know, there's this one with Van Hammer where somebody says, the good thing Mick had the presence of mind to move the protective mats before doing the sunset flip, just to ensure that it would do grievous bodily harm to me. And so I would get a 2 count out of something that would literally hurt me for 6 weeks, you know.
In an alternative universe somewhere, you did a sunset flip off the Hell in a Cell, I like to think. Again, probably a 2 count only as well. We spoke briefly upstairs about Japan, and you say that you kind of would look at something and go, oh, that looked great, but what did it in the concrete? How did that creativity and that mindset come into play then when you went out to Japan and you participated in King of the Deathmatch?
Wait, okay.
Oh, we did?
Go ahead, you read this out loud, okay? You see that I want to make me look, all right, read my text, all right, this is, all right.
Becky, it's hardcore legend Mick Foley. I'm here in the UK and I'm bragging to people that I know you. Well enough to get a text back from you. Want to make me look good in front of the boys? Mick, stop text. Not sure to say that. She replies, hardcore legend Mick Foley, you mean the reason I'm wrestling now? The reason I'm the man? Well, hello. How are you?
How cool is that? She's such a great person, and I'm glad I saved those text messages, you know, when she was getting frustrated, and I just saved them, and I'd be like, I was like, two pieces of advice. Be patient, be ready. It's like, I don't care if they usually have, writers, have it in your head. Always have something in your head. Don't let anyone else do your thinking for you. You never know when that microphone's going to end up in front of you. You never know when someone's going to get hurt. You never know when your break is coming. It's just important that when you get the gas pedal, you push that foot down on that accelerator and you ride it as hard as you can. And so there was just this feeling, I think, just an overwhelming feeling of joy when people realized she was getting that break. And so in her words, it was almost like the last 3.5 years had just been part of the storyline. You know, like just being frustrated enough. And so, I have it on good authority that Mr. McMahon is like complete and total confidence in her. And that's a big part of the battle. So couldn't be happy for her.
You talk about be ready when the microphone is handed to you. I'll put my hands up right now and say that you are my favorite promo guy.
Oh, thanks.
You really are. Whenever I've been asked, whether it be indies or the WWEs, they give me a microphone and ask me to do something, I always try to think to myself, how would Mick present this, or what would he do? So have you always kind of been, and the way you command the audience now, have you always just been really good with words?
Well, I have a way with words. Some people just have a way with words, and other people don't have a way. It's literally taken off a Steve Martin album from 1977. No, I like anything else. it comes, I believe it's part of the muscle memory process. The Ric Flair documentary, I saw it, it's a second of 2 public screenings. I was sitting right behind Charlotte, and it was really great to show Rick when he was playing the Nature Boy as opposed to when he had become the Nature Boy, and to see how he was doing an imitation of what he thought a cool guy should be. And so, like, when we all start, I think we're doing an imitation of what we think the wrestler in our mind sounds like. And then when you start, like, clicking, and it's really beautiful to watch. And I still think that one of the strengths of the Attitude Era was that you had like 4 or 5 people like all hitting their stride at just about the same time. We're like firing on all cylinders, and like The Rock went from being like almost on the cutting board to becoming one of the biggest stars in the company. And Steve Austin came in, Paul Heyman encouraged him to utilize that chip on his shoulder when he got to ECW. And then Steve just, he took what he had learned and he took that frustration he had and he was off to the races, and I like to think that I was that part of that group too. Triple H, shed the blue blood. Originally the Triple H character was like a stuffy, blue blood Greenwich, Connecticut resident, and then so it was a bunch of guys all finding their feet and really hitting their stride simultaneously. And I don't think I could have done it without like hundreds and hundreds of reps, doing those market-specific promos that I talk about. A young lady did an interview with me, and she mentioned that I had sang a song, on my that I did the 20 Years of Hell show, where I did the few of my favorite things about Sting, right? Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I just grabbed the microphone. I didn't know that guys did like one basic interview and then change it as long as I'm able, dropping an elbow on poor helpless Sting. These are a few of my favorite things. But I was very rare. I was asked like about if I had my own stable of people past and present. And I just like, off the top of my head, I was like, Bruiser Brody, Terry Funk, Abdullah the Butcher, and me. And I said, like, we couldn't fit into a PG era, there's some wild stuff. And one of the benefits of working with a guy like Abdullah was nothing was ever talked about. Nothing. Like, zero high spots. And you go, well, how do you do, my daughter asked me when, I was telling her a story about a guy named Ron. Wow, we are going off in some weird tangents, right? I was telling her about a guy named Rotten Ron Starr, because Ron was basically the first guy to teach me to brawl all around the building with me. We did that in Alabama in 1988, and I was like, wow, I found a tool like that I was able to go on and utilize around the world. And Ron probably made $150 a night for those, like, say, 6 nights. So he made a little bit of money, and here he taught me this incredible skill. I was able to make a good living from. And so he had an autobiography someone had helped him with. I was asked if I would write the foreword. I said I would. Weeks went by. I hadn't turned in a word. And a few more weeks by, and then the guy said, can you just give us a blurb? That means like say something about the book. And I was just like, I had a conversation with myself. I was like, are you really not gonna write this thing? Given how much he gave to you, what he got out of it in return. And I sat down for like 5 hours and I wrote the best foreword that I possibly could. And I was telling, I read it to my daughter to see what she thought. And it starts out where Ron Starr is coming into the territory, and Robert Fuller is one of the great unheralded characters, I think. Some of you know him as Tennessee Lee, he was, but he was a great character on television and in real life. And he's telling me about Ron Starr coming into the territory and how Ron, I already heard that Ron had, had several lawsuits from beating up fans. And he used to break glass bottles over his head, which I later took on, learned from him, and brought it to Japan. Jake the Snake Roberts told me in very wise words. He said, a wise man knows where to steal his material. So you pick up a little something from this guy here, a little bottles breaking over your head from Ron Starr, rip off the entire Terry Funk au revoir. A little bit of originality and you're fine. And then he told me he didn't think Ron cared for him. I said, why not? He goes, Jimmy, he's talking about Jimmy Golden. Jimmy and I gave him a back suplex, and we broke his back. Don't think he's forgiven me yet, Jacko. And then I find out I have to wrestle the guy. So he's a Vietnam vet with some mental problems, who's beaten up many fans, breaks bottles over his head, and doesn't like Robert Fuller. And I go over, hello, Mr. Starr, I'm Cactus Jack, I'm going to be wrestling. Would you like to go over a couple things? He goes, I'll see you in the ring.
Rough night.
And my daughter goes, what do you mean? Like, you wouldn't talk? Like, you wouldn't talk to the guy? And I said, well, sometimes not. She goes, well, how do you have matches? I said, I'm not going to lie. Some of them were bad, right? We can romanticize the past as much as we want. Some of them were bad. But there's this is a little something I talked about in the special. I was like, there's an element of magic that's either there or it's not. And you can't predict it, you can't script it. And anyone who's sat through like the last hour and a half of a 7-hour WrestleMania knows it's not there anymore, right? And you need that element of magic, because I firmly believe, like, you might not be able to reach out and touch it, but it's real to me. Like, you've either got it or you don't. And I said there were some nights you'd go out there and it just felt like you were floating on a cloud. And so I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. And Ron Starr, I was scared to death. And all of a sudden, we're brawling over the building. And this is, that was the first time I felt like I found my calling. Like I found my calling. So that was one of the most influential. Oh, this is going to lead back to Abdullah the Butcher, another guy who never talked over anything. And sometimes the matches, they wouldn't be considered classics by the standards of the day. But I'll tell you what, they looked like they were real. And the one grievance I have is that everybody looks like they're trying to win a contest. There's a big emphasis on false finishes and covering guys. Like, no one looks like they're fighting for their life. Like, that's what you lose with the emphasis on cool moves. And I'll tell you what, you go back and you watch Abdullah the Butcher matches, people look like they were fighting for their lives. And the crowd treated it like they were fighting for their lives.
I think that's because they were fighting for their lives.
Sometimes they were, but that leads to this market-specific promo. Only did it one time, and it was me and Abdullah the Butcher against Van Hammer and Johnny B. Yeah. I think I may have screeched it though. I think I was Cactus Jack and Abdullah mine. I don't think I went full opera on you.
You really like to sing. I've just realized this.
Yeah, I do. Does anyone know? Like, I get to sing. This is on the 14th. This will be the 4th time I get to sing with Norah Jones. I get to sing "Must Be Santa" with her singing back up for me. How freaking cool is that? And I'd say, when I went in to rehearse, I was terrified, And my friend who plays bass for her was like, dude, like, if you want to sing, like, just come in and rehearse with us. Because the year before I'd gone on stage and they were singing Silent Night, which is like their go-home song. And I'm standing like 6 feet behind. I have this conversation with myself. 2 dirtiest words in the English language. What if, I don't want to be sitting on my couch 10 years from now being really new in the... And it's like, what? If you have no talent, just pretend you do. You can be character. There you go.
Well, that's going to help me a lot. If I don't hear on the internet that you and Nora, I've lost my words, but if I don't hear about, I've lost it. But yeah, if I don't hear about you and Nora just fighting through the crowd, I'm going to be really, really annoyed. We did briefly, we got onto it then, we got sidetracked, but and you mentioned Japan. What was it like kind of going out there? Because now we speak about Japan and the internet's so big, so I can literally say Japan and people can probably tell me what Japan is like and they never would have gone there. You would have gone there in the days of before the internet, so you would have been told stuff and then would have gone there and experienced yourself. So before we get into the King of the Deathmatch, what was Japan like in itself?
I went there in 1991 for Giant Baba's All Japan. There was All Japan and New Japan were the 2 biggest groups. I like the All Japan style, even though the top stars would come. They had a wrestling war there too. So Bruiser Brody would go from All Japan, he would jump to New Japan and come back a couple of years later. But I like the style. New Japan was always a little bit faster. All Japan always had, to me, at that time, a little more selling, which was useful. for a guy like me, more blood in All Japan. And this, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, there were days, and these weren't exceptions, these were like pretty regular days. We ordered tapes that would come in, you get a 6th generation tape, and like maybe amongst the waves you could make out some activity in the ring. And I had a 13-inch black and white television set, and that's what I watched those matches on. I just thought that was going to be where I had a chance to make a name for myself. I saw what WWE, I left WCW, didn't look like I had an in to go back. I knew I wasn't what WWE was looking for, and I thought I could make a respectable living and work really hard in Japan. My first tour, I'm proud of it. I think I've only injured 2 people. There was one guy, I've hurt people, inflicted pain and misery on some people, but as far as injuring people, I was proud of the fact I took care of people. And there was one guy in Texas in '89 when I came off with the elbow. He had his head up just a little bit. My bicep caught him on the point of the jaw and drove his head into the ground and knocked him out. And then John Laurinaitis was Johnny Ace at the time. And believe it or not, in Japan, he was known for doing a moonsault. He was, I don't know if people knew Johnny Ace. It wasn't a great moonsault, but he did the moonsault, and he was Mrs. Baba's favorite wrestler. So I thought when Johnny would go up to do the moonsault, I'd climb up onto that second turnbuckle. I'd give him the back suplex, which he would then turn into a cross body. But you know, you learn so early on about tucking your chin. When I tucked my chin, I trapped his arm against my chest, and he couldn't turn, and he dislocated his elbow. And I was like forlorn about it. You know, we had 3 more weeks to go on the tour. I was afraid about hurting me. I'd already been taught. It was really well written stuff.
Is this before you were?
No, this is after it. So the idea was the battle of the authors. And I mean, I went into that studio and I was really giving everything I had, you know. And so I asked the guy, I said, how many celebrities do you have done their own voiceovers? And he said, counting you? I said, yeah. He goes, 1. I'm the only guy. He said, not every celebrity finds it as funny as you do. But I thought it was really well written. I don't know how well versed you are in your Hemingway, but there was a thing where I literally tore his arms off, and they go, that's it. Farewell to arms. And then Hemingway actually dies in the match, and the bell, boom, and the guy says, I guess we know for whom that bell tolls. He's like, dark humor was really well done. And Mr. McMahon just said, wow, if they did monster ratings during halftime of the Super Bowl with a claymation match, then why give MTV the ratings? You know, we should do something. And there was the bump in the road. And I don't curse very often, right? But I've got to curse just slightly here. Is I was the one who suggested the empty arena match, right? And so I told The Rock, just study Funk versus Lawler, empty arena. It's a classic, right? And then I get a phone call a couple days later. This is just a few days before the halftime match. And hey, how you doing? He goes, we got a problem. I said, what is it? He goes, I watched the match. And I said, yeah. And he goes, it's the shits. I said, no, it's a classic. He goes, no, it's not, it's the shits. And I go back and I watch it, and it's god-awful. The only thing good about it is that on television, they keep beeping things out. This is 1973, and they just got Terry Funk on television. He shows up, and he's doing an interview with Lance Russell. He goes, Lawler, you bastard. He's going
That's a great Funk. That's a great Funk.
Right? You bastard, you know. And then in the famous thing where he tries to use a shard of wood on Lawler's eye, Lawler turns it around and Funk ends up taking it, and Funk ends up with the man, my eye, Lawler, you bastard.
I love that you did yours later as well. Yeah, I love that.
And we did realize, I did watch it back, and I was like, this is awful, you know? And so The Rock and I just had to kind of create a movie, you know? So it was the first time and only time that I know of a match has been shot scene by scene. I took a beating in almost every scene, and none of the lines were written down. The Rock was just ad-libbing, you know, wisecracks every time that he, you know, every beating he administered, he had something funny to say about it, you know. Like I think when the picante sauce got in my eyes, And I went, my eye, my eye. And then The Rock was like, yeah, that's mild, you know, like, and so that's why we did it. And we taped it a couple days before the Super Bowl. And one of the problems we encountered is we just had that really wild, overly violent, gratuitously violent I Quit match. And USA, like, they did not want to see a drop of blood on that show, and that was an issue because I had, you know, about 25 stitches in my head. So I showed up for Halftime Heat wearing more gauze than Boris Karloff in the original Mummy movie. It's like literally swaddled in gauze, right, with a mask over it. And, you know, I was able to run through the airport. I was able to watch the match as it aired live. And this is where, you know, you learn about the suspension of disbelief. The people were not wrestling fans who were watching the Super Bowl game. But they were getting into the action, all this stuff we were doing. And then when I started hitting Rock with the big bag of popcorn, he started selling it like I was hitting him with sledgehammers. That's where the non-fans turned to each other. Oh, come on, that doesn't hurt. I had them and I lost them, you know. But I don't know why they've never done it again. It would seem like a good opportunity. Maybe it's because they don't have Sunday Night Heat anymore. But that wasn't, I don't know, it would be worth taking up. I might ask that question. It did very good ratings for them at the time.
Mick, it's been an absolute pleasure. We literally, I said to you before, I had 15 points I wanted to get through. How many do you reckon we actually got through, Mick, in this 45 minutes?
Three.
Let me cut them. Yeah, how many did you say?
3.
5. So we got that.
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
But how golden is that text message from Becky Lynch, right? All right. So I guess we're going to take some questions now?
So what we're going to do is, so I've had the pleasure of 45 minutes of me fanboying. Thanks everyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. We've got some pens and paper there, so you can write down some of your questions that you would want to ask Mick.
And this is what I'm going to ask. I don't want to be demanding, but I'm going to ask if we can bring me out to Becky Lynch's music, and for you guys to feel free to record that. I want to see that will get out there, right?
It will.
Yeah,
I'm not doing the second half unless we get that Becky Lynch music. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, get your questions written there. We'll sift through them, and. Also as well, we do have a replica belt at the back, raffles £1, so you have a chance to win that. So grab it in the raffle, go put some of your questions in there, and just want to say a big thanks to Mick.
Thank you.
Huge thank you to Fresh Water Webster and Mick Foley. We will be back in 20 minutes. Without further ado, he's told me, yeah, everyone get your phones out. He's told me to do this. He's like, he wants this quote. Okay, so. Please welcome to the stage, Mickey Lynch! I did it!
Woo! You know, there's a term in our business referred to as marketing. That's all the athleticism I had in my body. As a matter of fact, when I saw... All right, fire away. This should be interesting. Okay. You guys having a good time?
Yeah! If I do hit any questions that we repeat, of course, I will just say that we repeat them. So yeah, have a okay then. This is from Pete Hurst. Do you think you and your characters would have the same success in the modern era as you had in the Attitude Era?
No, probably not. I can't... Yeah, in a way, yeah. Like, I think, you know, my willingness to go deep into characters you know, to really try to embody them as best as I could, would work, I think, in any generation. William Regal wanted me to talk to the students at NXT. I went back there for a couple of days, about a month ago, about the importance of, you know, being in that character. Like we were saying, you're not playing the role of a character, but inhabiting that character from the time you get backstage, you know, until the match is over. And I think that would be beneficial. I'd have to have more offense. In the current era, I would need more offense.
That box jump.
That wasn't bad, right? I would tell, when I used to talk to students, this is well before Be a Star, right? The acronym for show tolerance and respect, how you use them, when and why. I'd say, for example, I wrestled, 15 years full time, and then, another 10 years, doing occasional matches. And I said, and I didn't have that many moves. Like, you probably can't. That's not true. And I would ask the fans if they could count 10 moves I'd used. And by the time we got to 4, they'd start saying mandible claw, okay, 1. And I go, okay, elbow, 2. Mr. Socko, I'd go, that's a mandible claw with a sock. Somebody would say, power bomb. I said, I'll give you $10,000 if you can find a video of me doing a power bomb. And we'd peter out at about 6 or 7. So I would probably need a couple more moves to be successful in the modern era.
There's people in the back now with their phone out looking for that power bomb. They are.
Well, gorgeous Gary Young and I actually used the power bomb. I don't know if it's the first time in the U.S., but we used a double team power bomb. I think that the Fabulous Freebirds had used. And then Terry Gordy was big. He was real big. He's one of those unheralded greats that probably most of you missed out on. But man, his stuff looked real, especially when he was over in Japan. And to this day, he throws one of those big, great punches, the big one, bringing it all the way back here. And just a really unheralded, great worker. But Gary Young and I would do the double team power bomb, where he would go for the power bomb and I'd be the guy with lifting up the head, but I never had the torque, the lower or upper body strength to do that confidently without hurting anybody. Yeah, I did powerbomb Frogman LeBlanc, and it did not go well. And I just didn't feel comfortable having somebody's fate in my hands unless I was, knew that I could do it without injuring them. That's a dangerous move if you, it's a very small degree of error there. Just once or twice. But I have utilized the Doctor Who screwdriver set because they look like tools that elves would use. Oh. And by the time a kid, because Doctor Who's popular in the States too, but by the time they get into it, they're usually 10 or 11, they're past that age, and they just look magical, those little Doctor Who screwdriver sets. And Australian comic Brendan Burns has a great story about one of the Doctor Who's, but I can't do it justice, and therefore I won't. But I've only seen it a couple times. I understand it's got a big following, but I have not seen it.
This is from Paul D. So it's Paul D. If you could wrestle any modern wrestler, who would it be? WWE or non-WWE?
Or non-WWE. I'm tempted to say guys that resembled me, like Kevin Owens or Dean Ambrose. But I mean, resemble me in style or psychology. But I love working with guys who have completely opposite styles. So what I could do, like I look at Ricochet and think what I could have done with him in my prime, because I would be able to incorporate just enough of what he did, and while making it look like he was fighting for his life. And it would be one of those matches that hopefully would be like one of those showcase matches. Like, to this day, I'm so proud of the fact that Shawn Michaels remembers Mind Games so well. thinks it gave his character an added edge, and that's exactly what the goal was. Going in, my goal was always like, all right, if that guy's not more over than he was when we started that match, then most of my reason for being in it has been a failure. You know, I wanted to have great matches, but I really took my role seriously as a guy who you know, got other people ready for the real big thing. So, you know, that was definitely my goal, was to show a harder edge to Shawn Michaels. So that'd be my same goal if I had a match with Ricochet. And he's small enough. The thing about him and Shawn, he projects bigger than he is, but he's not a real big guy. So I could do power moves. And so that was one of the joys of working with Shawn Michaels, is that I could do power moves with Shawn. So yeah, if I had my pick of the current wrestlers, I think I could, in my prime, I could have had an excellent match with Ricochet.
This is from Joe Garner. This is a great one. You obviously love Christmas. What's your favorite family Christmas tradition?
We started a new one last year. My son Huey was my elf, you know, when there are no children here, right? Okay, all right. I know Santa, all right, let's just say I know him. Huey was my elf, and he did an amazing job. We would visit these homes on Christmas Eve, and it would be this incredible rush where you would give a performance while not acknowledging you had an audience. Parents would wake up the kids and Santa's downstairs, and the currency was the whispers. There was one night I did it for one of the WWE photographers, and his kids were so quiet that there was no feedback. But that feedback about Santa's here, Santa, you know, and then, you know, as soon as I say, you know, oh, those kids are fast asleep, they'll never expect a thing. And then that's their goal, that's their sign. Boom, beat it upstairs. And so Huey decided to sit out a year. I'd had a discussion with him about how funny it would be if Santa had gas, right? You know, it's like, and he'd be like, what was that, sir? Oh, I didn't hear anything. Come on, sir, you had to have heard it there. Oh, no, it must be the wind, you know? So, long story short, we're laughing so hard. This was on the trip where we were in Tennessee, right? We went down, took it in May of 2015. I did a signing in Maryland, independent show in West Virginia, then we headed for Tennessee to go to Dollywood. And I looked at how far it would take me. It'd be 15 hours or 10, 12 hours to drive back to New York, 10 to 12 hours to go to Orlando. So we went to see Becky against Sasha Banks, and it was like the best investment of time, you know, possible. It was the first day that Becky did the orange hair, and they had one of the best matches I've ever seen live, and I'm so glad we did it. But then he decides to hold out on me. He's not going to be my elf unless we can do the farting in the living room. I was like, no, we can't actually do, and he actually sat out. So then I had this scenario where things went so well at the Weipert home. Like I sat down, I was down to 237 at that time, and that's a lot of stones to have lost. And Huey was telling me, Dad, you're too skinny to be Santa. And I'm like, I have to believe there's a place in the world for a 240-pound Santa. And the Weiperts, you know, they're not, you know, they were a new family, one small child. And I sat down in their chair, and it literally, it just shattered, you know. And the whole thing just imploded almost, you know. And I put on what I thought was a good performance, you know, top notch. And you get the feedback, and that text message was like, oh my God, it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. My husband's even more excited than my daughter. He's running around like a little kid. And I was like, would you like a visit next Christmas Eve? And she was like, oh wow, we would love that. I went, well, let me give you a condition. So last year, Huey returned, where with the use of a Minions fart gun, hidden up my sleeve, we made that dream come true. And it was one of these things where it was even better than we imagined it, you know? Finally, about the fourth time, I was like, Santa, you had to have heard it there. I was like, okay, I've been holding in for 10,000 houses. And And now my son, it's so funny, 3 years ago, he was 5'4", and now he's 6'3". And the way around that, we're just gonna put on what we call the curly-headed F-U-C-K wig, and he's gonna be Buddy the Elf Jr. So, it'll be a new Christmas tradition. There you go. We just wasted 10 minutes of this Q&A on a Santa story.
Why did Terry Funk's shoes come off at Hell in a Cell? I'm not gonna lie, I saw this one backstage and I was like, oh, it's going to the top. It's going near the top.
The only thing I can think of is like, all right, this is what happened when I got knocked out legit, you know, and those of you who've seen the special know what I've said. Like, one of the ironies about professional wrestling is that while people may knock it, our choice of entertainment being fake and phony and show business or whatever, you know, I'll say, okay, you can admit to all that, but then go up to that most ardent, you know, MMA enthusiast and say, hey man, does your sport continue when one of the participants is no longer conscious? Pussy. And now, in the modern era, clearly a match like that would stop, you know? That'd be the right move and the correct move is what we've learned about head injuries. But at that time in '98, you didn't stop matches, you know? You just kind of went along. And so Terry entered the ring to try to buy me time. And I guess it was just the velocity of the choke slam, you know, the downward journey. Shoes came off. And I swear to you, that was my first thought when I rolled over and I regained consciousness. I thought to myself, where'd those shoes come from? Look at those shoes. And I don't know why they came off. They just did. He was moving quickly, and he must not have tied. The reason I was late on the way out here, you know, when you just announced me, is I was tying my shoes tighter so I could do what I think I did, which was jump up here without, you know, Terry was probably just hanging out backstage, didn't have those shoes tied tight enough, didn't know he'd have to come to my rescue, and his shoes came off. There you go.
You never know when you need to have those shoes tied. Are there any match stipulations? The part says about dream opponents, so we'll skip that on. Is there any match stipulations that you never did that you wish you had? That's from Tom C.
Punjabi prison.
Funny you should say that, Nick.
I think I could have come up with some fun stuff for that. The one thing I always wanted to do, I always wanted to drop an elbow off a TV truck onto an opponent who was on the hood of a car. Because that way, I was always big. I was one of the first people that I know of to bother the cameraman about camera shots. And now they do it all the time. But I remember like going up to the guys in World Class Wrestling and saying, look, if you're shooting me dropping an elbow off the ring apron over my shoulder, we're losing the depth perception and all the impressiveness. He's like, well, how else can we shoot it? What about a low angle shot, you know? So if you look back on that match I had with Randy Orton at Backlash, I mean, it looks like I'm coming into your living room, you know? And then not only when I hit they'd shake the camera just a little bit, and it'd be really majestic. And I just thought having a camera right down below the hood of that car, with a little extra shock absorption there, you know, to absorb the blow, that it would give you some great chance. I always envisioned matches with Jim Ross calling them in my head, you know, so that if I say like hit a double arm DDT. I would then gracefully roll off the car underneath the TV truck. And then the next time you saw me, I'd be standing up there with that incredible, like, low angle shot. He's on the truck. God is my witness, he's on the truck. And yeah, that was always, I wanted to do that until some of you know I was going to, it was temporarily scheduled to wrestle Dean Ambrose at SummerSlam, I think 2012, and then I failed my impact test, and you know, was told that I could never wrestle again. But I wanted to bring that one out. I wanted to break out that move I'd never done. I wanted to drop an elbow off the TV truck, like over, and I wanted people to be like in catering, and I wanted to fly over people in catering. I don't know why a truck and a car would be in catering.
He was big too, you have to stop.
All right. And here's the thing, like, I wanted to impress one of the Bellas with that elbow. Can you guess which one I wanted to impress? The mom. Take that, Johnny Ace.
This is from Philip Marshall Osborne, great name. Much like the different stages of WWE, Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era, what was your personal favourite stage of your career?
Oh, man. You know, looking back on it, the Attitude Era was amazing to live through. Love the Attitude Era. But I think the era where I grew the most in the shortest amount of time was in ECW, under the tutelage of Paul Heyman. And he would just encourage, he had a way of bringing out the best in everybody. I called him like the master gardener. Like, he would know that some plants needed more attention than others. And if you didn't need like full, you didn't need constant attention, he just let you have the nutrients you needed, like, to flourish. Some people needed more hands-on, and in some cases, like I said earlier with Steve Austin, it's like, here's a guy with a chip on his shoulder, and I'm going to utilize that. I'm going to emphasize that. I'm going to bring out the best in him. And he brought out the best in everybody. And he knew just exactly what to say, how to do it, how to encourage it. And some of my favorite promos I did in ECW were the anti-hardcore promos.
That's my favorite.
The anti-hardcore promos, it was just so much fun to be sitting in that room trying to think of the worst. I was like, Paul, what's the wimpiest, like, least hardcore food in history? He's like, a watercress sandwich, And then I would go, hey, I think I got a piece of watercress stuck in between my teeth. And then I would take the microphone cable, to floss in between my missing teeth, because I'm hardcore, And there was that great thing, Huey, my youngest son, he's pretty tough on me. He doesn't put over much that I've done, right, ever in my career. But he loved the fact that I was talking to, did you see the little spot where I had a teddy bear? Like, I would just grab whatever was available, and I was doing like a ventriloquist act with the teddy bear, and it was the worst ventriloquist act. It was like, what's your favorite wrestling organization, Charlie? And he'd be like, ECW, ECW. And it was just, the stupider, the better. And then the old Paul Heyman adage, I think this is really important, that make them laugh and cut them off and make them feel bad about laughing. And I took that to heart. So I think, my favorite to live through was the Attitude Era. My favorite to... learning experience was my time in ECW.
Lee Tucker, would you be tempted to have one more match like Shawn Michaels?
Oh, man. If I got the type of payoff Shawn was rumored. Hey, you know what? I'll tell you a funny story about WrestleMania in Dallas, right? Where even the New Day didn't even know we were coming out. That's no one knew that we were. Me, Austin, and Shawn were coming out, and I'd worked hard. I'd lost like 50 pounds. I'd been training pretty hard, but I still had that noticeable limp. All I could think about is walking down there. Don't limp, don't limp, don't limp. 100 yards down there. To that ring, and I knew I was on the no-touch list, right? Like, legally, there were guys who told you can't touch him, right? So now all I have to be able to do is throw forearms in rapid succession and the knee in the corner. And I'm still wondering, like, I haven't thrown a forearm. Like, I've been doing all this underwater aquatic punching and stuff like that, so I thought my wind was going to be decent. I was still really nervous, and then Sheamus comes up to me and he goes, and I do a terrible brogue, okay, but I'm going to do it anyway. He goes, I want you to hit me as hard as you can out there, fella. And I said, I think I can make it look good without that. And he grabs me and goes, as hard as you can. And I just felt the weight of the world off my shoulders. Like, this is going to be relatively easy. And I swear to you, when I look back at that video, I thought someone had sped it up because I don't ever recall moving that fast. Like the rapid succession, I was hitting Sheamus as hard as I could with my forearm. He was okay 5 minutes later, and I can still point to the exact spot where the bone in my forearm is still sore. I hit him as hard as I could 20 times at his request. And then I was, it was a nice little payoff too, you know, but you can only make that type of reappearance once. I don't think I could ever be cleared. I don't think it would be smart to ever, you know, but I will say that when one of the top neurologists in the country told me that I couldn't wrestle, right? Never wrestle again. I'm so proud as a wrestler of my reply, which was to look this noted neurologist right in the eye and say, I can work an entire match around my left knee. Like I was hearing, but I wasn't listening. And then he said, Mr. Foley, when I met you 2 weeks ago, you struck me as a bright young man. Young was his word. He goes, I've been doing some reading on you. You've got a lot going for you. If you want to get another neurologist to clear you, that's your business, but I'm telling you, you should never wrestle again. And it was like, all right, it was kind of a relief. And the first thing I did, I got on the road and I called Edge, because he'd retired under similar circumstances. And it was nice to have somebody who'd been through that. So I can't imagine a circumstance, well, I can. Shawn Michaels' money. That'd be awfully tough to say no to, you know, like, you know, geez, it's more money than I made in my career. The rumor having it.
We said we wouldn't talk about
Okay.
This from Scott. I hope that's his full name. What persona do you feel allowed you to connect with the fans the best?
Oh, the one that allowed me to connect the most was Latter-day Mankind. I know you guys want me to say Cactus Jack, right? But I did not want to be Latter-day Mankind. I felt like I was kind of forced into that by the breaking down of my body. Plus, my back was up against the wall. The Attitude Era, and everyone was seeing what Steve Austin was doing and trying to be like Stone Cold Light, if there is such a thing. Got to the point where none of the good guys were actually nice guys at all. They were trying as ardently as they could to not show any sign of kindness or empathy towards anyone, because they were trying to do what Steve was working for Steve, and everyone out there is hip and cool, and we're not. And I'm like, there's a lot more of me out there than there are of them. And I just thought that the room was open for a kinder, gentler character, and that I could have some fun with it and extend my career by another year. And I didn't know, for example, The Rock didn't know either. We had a nice talk about this a few WrestleManias ago. We had no idea the stuff that we were doing was going to connect with fans to the point where it's a distant second from the Hell in a Cell, but it's definitely second place. That's what I've asked about the second most often, like, you know, about the Hell in a Cell, about the Rock and Sock Connection. And I love the Rock and Sock Connection. You guys were the greatest tag team ever. And I'll look at them and say, can you name one match we were in? And they go, they just remember the way that we made them feel. And so over the years, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you it's hundreds of people have come up to me specifically to tell them that that character either took their mind off the troubles they were in, or they found something to relate to. And anytime, like maybe I was one of the top 5 guys there, right? But almost, it was a gift. Sorry, Dude Love fan. But even I didn't like Dude Love.
This is from Squid. How does it...
You can't just invent names here. What's his name?
Squid.
It's you? Nick? Is it a nickname? Yeah. What's your real name? It doesn't matter.
How does it feel to take your first bump after your hip surgery from Joey Ryan's dick? It does say move at the end, but I didn't think it needed the word move. Joey Ryan's dick.
I think what was lost in all that controversy was that I did take a full flip bump. There's one of me, and I didn't take it as quickly as some of the other guys, you know. But I mean, I'm upside down in midair. It is like one of the greatest sports photographs you've ever seen. And of all, you know, Jim Cornette was really upset. And what upset me about, hold on a second, hear me out. What upset me about Jim being upset was when he said, like, Mick has to learn how to say no. And I was so offended. I was like, could he not tell that was my idea? Like, so after I did a full day of going out and doing media, right? The next day's the show, and I asked the guy Joe, the promoter there, over the top wrestling is
OTT.
Yeah, OTT. And I said, hey, I've got an idea for me and Joey Ryan. He goes, like basically whatever you want. So the next day, a couple of Irish wrestlers listen, and I say to Joey, I say, hey, Joey, just say I got blinded, you know? And I went for the mandible claw. Could you do a leapfrog? And one of the guys goes, oh, that writes itself. And sure enough, you know, I came out with a save, blinded, you know. Joey went to save me. I go for the claw. He did the leapfrog. And the rest is history. But it was like a sacrilege. How dare you, you stain the reputation of this sport. And I'm like, I used a sock as a finisher. And like, just ask my son, like, you take the believability of wrestling he claims went down the drain the moment I defeated Dwayne Johnson. So like, he looks at that thing, this is when he's like 5 years old, you know, and I was like, you don't think Dad was good? And I put in the DVD of me defeating The Rock, and he looks and he goes like, that's so unbelievable. And he didn't mean unbelievable, like incredible, he just meant, nope. What's that? Oh. I'm not used to a heckler complimenting me. Hey, you're good. No, I mean, it was fun to do that. It was fun. And Brendan Burns, again, I mentioned him. He's like, you gotta understand, he goes, it's like a bit. You know, there are matches and then there are bits. You know, I always thought, you know, a good wrestling show, I mean, when I say like a great 3-ring circus, means there's something for everybody. You know, and I've been the tightrope walker many times. And so on that night, I was one of 13 clowns getting out of the trunk of a Ford Pinto. And I enjoyed it. Yeah.
What is your funniest Mr. Socko moment? That's from Josh.
Let me see. Oh yeah, there you go. That was just golden. The big disappointment in Santino when the Sock and the Cobra had the face off. I believe I had only received 4 standing ovations from the boys and the women, you know, the talent. And the 3 other occasions was when I was ready for the triage unit, you know. I quit with The Rock, Hell in a Cell. I'm told I received a standing ovation. I don't remember it. And then there was one other one I was in rough shape. And then after I walked to the back and got a standing ovation from the boys, not that I quote The Miz very often, but my reaction was like, really? Really? Hey, it was entertaining. And when I saw it back, I thought, you know what? I can see why people applauded, because it was so perfectly ridiculous, you know. And it was a pleasure to do it. Santino deserves so much credit for being a legit tough guy playing a complete buffoon. You know, usually it's the other way around. And so, you know, he got the call, can you speak Italian? He said, yes, I can. And then I marvel at what he did. He was so entertaining for so many years. And I also marvel at the fact that there were children out there thinking that I stole Mr. Sacco from him.
It's a big word.
It is big words, sorry. Richard F. Front Row. That's a weird name. We all know you as the hardcore legend, but how do you get in that mindset for a real hardcore match?
Tori Amos songs. That's it. Yeah, when I did that match with Terry Funk, the first one, the barbed wire, no rope barbed wire, like it was maybe 150 people in this little like Guma, Japan, right? But we knew that the Japanese media was there and that they'd have that match in full color in front of 500,000 people weekly was their circulation. We considered that like our TV tapings when we saw Japanese media there. And this was a match where Terry was so iconic in the Japanese culture that he dressed with the Japanese wrestlers. I dressed with a Canadian guy, Rick Patterson, and Tracy Smothers, veteran journeyman. And man, I saw and we were huddled over a kerosene heater. It was just slightly above freezing. And I saw those ropes come down. I saw the young boys, the training wrestlers, putting up that barbed wire. And I was like, I got to find a way to transform from a somewhat compassionate human being into someone willing to go in there. It's like Mr. Miyagi said, right? You either go, you stand on one side of the road, you're fine. Stand on the other, you're fine. You stand in the middle, you get squashed like a grape. You either do it or you don't do it. But you don't stand halfway. You won't get squashed like a grape, but you'll get torn to shreds. And almost importantly, you'll give people a bad match. And I had to find a way to transform, and I went rifling through these cassette tapes of the AC/DC and the Kinks and Bruce Springsteen. I was like, no, there it is! Little Earthquakes by Tori Amos. And there was this one song that just reached out to me, a song called Winter. And I'm not exaggerating when I say, by the time I had my fifth listen, I was in an alternate world. And this is truly the only really badass thing I've ever said in my life. And it wasn't a promo. The only person who heard it was Tracy Smothers. Tracy goes, Cactus. He goes, there's not many people out there. Promise me you won't do anything crazy out there. And I looked at him like it was the most absurd request ever made. And I just said, I can't do that. And we went, oh, brother, the stuff we did to each other, it was, there were no spots, it looked like we were fighting for our lives, and it was, I was so proud of that, but that was what I needed for that occasion. I didn't listen to music all that often before matches, but if you put together a list of, Mick Foley's or Cactus Jack's 10 wildest matches, chances are I listened to Winter before 8 of them. Sorry for all you alpha males out there who were wishing for another answer.
Why'd you look at me? I'm wearing a turtleneck, I can't say anything. What we got? Adam Watson. When did it sink in what had happened at King of the Ring, and how did it affect your mindset going forward?
Oh, that's kind of a two-part answer. It sank in. The damage I'd done to myself was very apparent. When I got home, my wife and I looked at another school district in a much smaller house. That was when I started believing in my own mortality, and that's kind of what ushered in the latter-day mankind. Because if you go back from June of '98 through August of 1998, that character lightened up almost immediately, and it was what was needed to connect with the audience, but it was also what was needed to keep me active in wrestling and realizing I just couldn't do those things with such frequency anymore. As far as the match having an impact, I didn't know. It didn't seem like it had any impact at first. This is where I'm lucky that we weren't in the internet age, because if we were, it probably would have trended for 2 or 3 days, hashtag Hell in a Cell, and been forgotten. And instead it was able to grow at an organic rate. It's kind of like a snowball going downhill, and it just started gathering momentum. Because believe me, I was there, in the aftermath, when I did a signing in Fall River, Massachusetts, and Sable's line was 5 or 6 times longer than mine. I remember just literally kicking my mask, like it was a soccer or football. All right, I'd like that gentleman to stand so I can send a photo to Brock Lesnar. Dude, that's not cool at all right? It's not cool. So please don't do that, okay? Are you the guys who've been shouting out random nonsense? All right. I don't usually drop F-bombs, but shut the fuck up. But in the aftermath of that match, it really seemed like no one cared. And then it just started catching momentum. And I've never seen another situation like that. And I don't think it could happen today because it would be so instantaneous and then forgotten. But never dreamed, especially in the couple weeks that followed that match where no one seemed to care. It never dawned on me that 20 years later I'd be, talking about it almost on a daily basis. So yeah, it took a while to connect, but when it did, it connected in a big way. To the point where I've literally met more than 17,000 people who claim they were in the 17,000 people who were there. And it's not that they're lying, they're just repeating history the way they wish it had happened. They wanted to be there so long that in their mind they were.
We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to see if we can squeeze in one.
Sorry, I had to just.
Foley. So we get 2 in. So this is from Sam Weeks. Who do you think you helped legitimize, improve the fans' image the most?
I will tell you that I caught a red-eye flight home from Edmonton, Alberta in May of 2004 after I had the Backlash match with Randy Orton. And by the time I got home and watched Raw that night, the attitude among the fans had changed so significantly that he was a babyface within like a month. It was exactly what he needed at that point. The fact that to this day he considers that his favorite match, I think is pretty telling. I thought I'd come up short at WrestleMania a month earlier, and man, I was really driven. I was really driven to deliver the best performance that I could, but also to take this kid who had this world of potential and give him a boost the way the guys had given me a boost on my way up. And I think it left an incredible impression. And so I think for that sake, that angle we had, the build and then the payoff at Backlash was probably the most important in terms of elevating an opponent.
Woo!
I will tell you this little insider info, is that he took, there is a degree of theatrics in what we do. There was no theatrics involved in his reaction to landing back first in those tags. To the point where he went up that stage, this is where then I threw him off the stage, and when Mike Chioda went to check on him, right before I dropped that elbow, it looked like I was coming into your living room. Mike Chioda went over to check on him, and his response to Chioda was, "Chioda, those tacks were a bad idea."
I think this will be the last one. I think it's a lovely one to finish on as well. It's from Claire. I've been a lonely wrestling fan for 27 years. None of my friends get it. What match would you choose to show a non-wrestling fan and how great it truly is?
Kenny Omega versus a 9-year-old girl in Japan. You can't go wrong with a couple of the Omega classics for the current generation. And then I would tell people to watch the best of 3 series between Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat from 1989, and maybe conclude with Funk and Flair in a 27-minute I Quit match, my favorite match of all time. If you can't sell them between the current, the absolute zenith of the current product and the genius and poetry of Steamboat and Flair, they're not, they're just not in the market for what we do. But that would be my answer. That would be, yeah. And then if that doesn't work, show them the dick flip with Joey Ryan and me. I guess this is it, right? I appreciate you guys coming out. And if it's not too much to ask, we're going to draw the winner here. Let's do it.
Foley.
Oh yeah, I'll be done. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll be. Okay. Just to show you, this is it can't possibly be rigged, so I'm gonna just pick up. Michael Francis Foley. Number 310.
That's the wrong number.
There you go! Oh! And is this the best night of your life? It doesn't matter. I know, she was emotional earlier. Come on over here. All right. Mick Foley, instantaneous risk-reward ratio analysis. That would tell me, like, within a split second whether a move was worth doing based on the risk versus the reward versus the risk. And so, for example, Royal Rumble 2000 against Triple H. Mr. McDonald told us in no uncertain terms there will be no pedigree in those thumbtacks. But after I kicked out the first time and they were just laying there was like 900 of those shiny metallic beauties, I did the Foley risk-reward ratio analysis in my head and I thought, okay, I could lose an eye, but think of the pop. And then all those years later, when Chris Jericho was on the stage at Madison Square Garden, when I said I'd never defeated him, he came up and he laid down. Like, I knew that all I had to do was drop some form of an elbow, just even rudimentary elbow, and it was gonna like just dwarf the reaction I'd received in 2000. But I ran the Foley risk-reward ratio analysis and I came to the conclusion that this is gonna hurt for like 2 weeks. And you can actually hear me say to Jericho, I'm all out of elbows. If it hadn't been for CM Punk getting up on that stage to be the referee, I wouldn't have done it. But then I realized, like, all right, if I don't do it, I'm gonna regret it for the rest of my life. And then you can actually hear me say to Jericho, like, you're gonna take all the impact on this. And I did. I dropped an elbow where he took all the weight of my body, and I realized I should have done that 20 years earlier. But no, so I'm not gonna do a sunset flip. But let me sign this bad boy for you, okay? All right. Do we have a marker here? I think we do. WWF title.
Pardon?
There it is. There it is. All right. Let's do this.
So I was joking earlier with some of the guys when we were meeting earlier about how I couldn't afford a title, and I've always wanted a title since I was like yay high, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to win that. No. There's no chance. No, my actual words were, there's no chance in hell I'm going to get that title. Oh my God.
Well, so, a little backstory. I don't know if you know this, but anyone who's held the title, when they sign the title belt they will list how many times they held it, right? So I used to write Mick Foley 3 times. And then I gotta admit, I got a little envious of Ric Flair. Ric Flair 16x, 16 times. So I'm like, I gotta top Ric Flair. So now I sign it, Mick Foley, 48 days. The length of my 3 title reigns combined. Here you go, Janine. Put that over your shoulder. There you go. Thank you so much, boss. Thank you. Great job. Thank you, Janine. Have a nice day.